Jonathan Tobin, great to be with you. We follow much of JNS. Tell us about the conference and about JNS.
Well, JNS, Jewish News Syndicate, jns.org, we are a comprehensive news service that covers Israel, covers the Jewish world, covers American politics in a way that I don't think anybody else covers these topics. Stripped of left-wing bias, stripped of anti-Israel bias, with a dedication that is not normal in today's journalistic environment to telling the news straight, not guided by some ideological construct that sees the world, through race or through some other artificial false idea about the world, which constitutes so much of journalism today. We don't do any of that. We give our readers, listeners, viewers, because we are, our podcasts, are as important to us right now as our news, our website and our syndication service. We're giving people the straight dope about what's going on, and there's an enormous hunger for that. We've seen that throughout, journalism. People are tired of what the corporate mainstream media, are slinging to them. They know they're not getting the whole truth. We're part of this movement to create a new journalism that is based on the verities of old journalism, the idea of getting to the truth, of trying to tell the whole story. That's what we're about.
Yeah, well, I would think CBN News kind of fits
absolutely.
into that as well.
We're part of the same movement, you know.
And I know Gary Lane from the Global Lane has interviewed you several times. Why is JNS so important after October 7th?
Well, we're in a moment of unique crisis. I say that's certainly true for Israel. It's certainly true for the Jewish people, but I feel for the whole Western world. There is a war going on. October 7th was kind of the tip of the spear of these genocidal terrorists. But what it set off in its aftermath, that was the tip-off that this is not just, another terrorist attack, another terrorist war that Israel has to deal with. This is part of a war against Western civilization. The reason why American college campuses turned into hotbeds of anti-Semitism after October 7th, with mobs of students, faculty, and administrators supporting the killers, the murderers, the people who committed mass murder, rape, torture, kidnapping, rather than the one Jewish state, the democratic Jewish state. It's because they bought into these toxic leftist ideas, these neo-Marxist constructs like critical race theory, intersectionality, settler colonialism. In American political debates, that's put down as culture war stuff. But it's not culture war stuff. It is a war on our entire culture. It's a war on the West. What's happening to the Jews is the canary in the coal mine, because it's a small part of it. The discussion right now, the debate about President Trump's efforts to rid some of our elite universities of their institutionalized anti-Semitism. It's about more than anti-Semitism. And the reason why so many of his critics, even those that acknowledge that there's a problem on campuses, are wrong, is because they're saying, oh, you're doing too much. You're not just addressing this narrow issue. You're trying to really change the way academia is constructed right now. Well, that is the problem. We have this movement, these progressives who have been on this long march through our institutions and their war is not just against Israel and the Jews. Their war is against the West. It's against Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome, and all of the Western canon. And we're just the targets right now, but the target is all of Western civilization, the foundational values of the American Republic. And JNS is needed right now, just as CBN is needed, because we need people reporting the truth about this battle, telling the truth about what's at stake here. And that's why it's so important. October 7th is the wake-up call. We didn't need such a horrific, terrible, traumatic thing to awaken the world to what's going on. But in its aftermath, these enemies of the West, as well as of the Jews, showed their true colors. These mobs of anti-Semites chanting for genocide, chanting for terrorism. This is the moment when we have to turn around and say no more, not enough. JNS's reporting, our opinion, our podcast, all that we're part of this movement to push back against it, and that's why we think we're needed more than ever.
You do a commentary every day, but is this the thread that runs through your commentary, this challenge, this assault on Western
You saying I repeat myself?
No.
Well, it is. You're right.
Yeah.
This is a battle. This battle against the West, as well as the Jews, is a thread that runs through our coverage. It runs through, yes, a lot of my own work. I write, a daily column.
I compliment your work, by the way. We really value that.
Thank you. This is the struggle that we're part of.
Yeah.
It's not the only issue we cover, but it all comes back to that. It all revolves back to that. Whatever else we're talking about, it's part of this great war that's being waged by these anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-civilization so-called progressives, and that's where we are right now. We didn't choose this battle.
Yeah.
The other side chose it. What we're choosing to do is to answer back and not let their lies, their distortions go unanswered.
Is this a defining moment in Israel's history right now with the new administration in the White House, the threat of a nuclear Iran, and just finishing up the war in Gaza?
I think it is. We are at a turning point, hopefully. Now, we're in the news business. We know that today's threat is terrible, but there's going to be something else down the line. There will always, these challenges are always with us. We just passed Passover, and we read on Passover in the Haggadah during our Seder, in every generation they rise against us. Yet the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us. And that's our struggle, yes. But the moment right now is there is a unique opportunity. And a unique opportunity that I'm happy to say the American administration is seizing by taking on, this woke war against the values of the West and America in a serious way in which no one has tried before. And as I said, this is not just about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a big piece of it. It's it's a rallying point. But it's about more than that. This is a threat that is about America, everybody's America. And here in Israel, the threat is existential. It's always been existential from the first moment and before of Israel's existence, since 1948. But there is a unique opportunity with an administration that understands these, what's at stake here. President Trump, some people love him, some people hate him. He gets it about this issue. Now, we have to hope that the way he goes about it leads to a good outcome. We're in the news business. We talk about what is, not necessarily about what we want to happen. We're covering what happens. And if, we want him to succeed and we want this to have a good outcome. But in the end, this is about, these two countries, these two allies, these two democracies, hopefully working together to eradicate these enemies, not just of Israel, but of the entire West. That's when Israel defeats Hamas and Hezbollah, these Islamist groups, Israel's just their first target. They think they chat in Tehran and elsewhere, death to Israel, death to America. Hopefully, we're at this unique window where we have a strong government in Jerusalem, a strong government in Washington, who see these things, as President Trump just said the other day, they see eye to eye. We have to hope that this is the moment when they will use that commonality to help solve some of these problems.
I just returned from San Remo, Italy, the 105th anniversary of the signing of the San Remo Resolution. Can you explain why this is not more well known here in Israel or in the...
Yeah, well, the truth is Israelis know their own history, but not as well as they should. San Remo was the moment where the international community sort of put into hard facts that the right of the Jewish people to return to their ancient homeland and to have a state, and that this land, this little country, would be once again open to the right of the Jews to return home. Americans, we have to admit, and I'm someone who has who studied history in college, Americans, we don't know our own history very well, let alone anybody else's history. Those polls would show, like, if you ask Americans, when was the Battle of Gettysburg fought? We don't want to really, you see the answers and you shake your head. So Americans don't understand, history, and quite frankly, journalists are generally just as bad. To journalists, what happened yesterday is history. What happened the day before yesterday is ancient history. Ask them what happened in 1920. Are you kidding me? They don't know what happened in the year 2000 when Israel and the United States offered the Palestinians an independent Palestinian state, including a share of Jerusalem. And the Palestinians said no, and said no again in 2001 and 2008, and have refused ever to negotiate since then. That they don't understand that, Gaza wasn't occupied before October 7th. Every Israeli settler, soldier, and settlement had been removed in 2005. They could have created, as President Trump has rightly said, they could have created Singapore or Dubai. Instead, they created this tunnel city of a terrorist state. You've got to know these facts before you start opining about what Israel should do next and what sacrifices it should make for a peace that the other side doesn't want. So this history is very important. And even the recent history, let alone the history of a century ago, tells you why why we are where we are and what our choices are. And it should lead us, if you actually study the history, try to understand it, try to understand why the Holocaust happened. You'll come to the conclusion that Israel has the right to, not merely the right to defend itself, but must defend itself, and that these genocidal people, this Hamas movement, this Iranian proxies, who are not so much analogous to the Nazis as their successors in believing in the genocide of the Jewish people, why they must be utterly eradicated and defeated.
What role does the Hebrew Scriptures, faith, play in JNS?
Well, we are part of, we're not strictly speaking a religious publication, but we are rooted in the history of this land, the history of the Jewish people. You don't have to be an observant Jew or an observant Christian to understand that when you dig down in this land, this is the homeland of the Jewish people. In the language of the left, the Jews are the indigenous people of Judea, of the land of Israel. No one else, actually. While, others are welcome, we truly believe that others are welcome, and we want to share the land with our friends, with our neighbors who are of different faiths. The Jews are the indigenous people here. We are not colonialists. We're not settlers. We're not imperialists. We've come home to the land that God promised us, and that Jews have lived continuously on for 3,000 years. There has never been a moment when there wasn't a Jewish presence of some sort in this sacred land. It is our home. It is the source of our history, of our faith, of our sense of identity. We Jews, we pray 3 times a day, and we mention Jerusalem. It is, when people say, well, I'm anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Semitic. Well, you know what? That's wrong, because if you're denying the rights of the Jewish people to this land, you're denying everything about Judaism. What's more, you're also denying rights to Jews that you would not deny to anyone else. So our scriptures, our sacred texts, run through everything we do. It's formed us. It is who we are. And that's why we are so dedicated to the defense of the Jewish people, the defense of the West. I spoke of Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome. This is a common civilization, and it should inspire all of us to defend the great things of our world, and we're all part of that. And that's what's at stake in this battle here in this very small, very sacred, very wonderful, beautiful land.
Amen. Anything you'd like to add, Jonathan?
Well, thank you so much to CBN for all you do. People want to read more about JNS. Go to us, jns.org. You can get our twice daily newsletter, which gives you everything you need to know, not just about the conflict, but about important issues in politics. And subscribe to our podcasts, which is a whole array of things. That's how people consume news and opinion now, and we are there for that.
Well, I highly recommend it. Jonathan, great to be with you.
Thank you.